not a black and white issue. It's not a yes and no question. It's not, am I in favor of trading Jake Guentzel or not? Good morning to you. Good Wednesday morning. I'm Dejan Kovacevic of DK Pittsburgh Sports, and this is Daily Shot of Penguins. It comes your way bright and early every weekday if you're into football and or baseball. I also offer daily shots of Steelers and Pirates. Penguins 5, Blue Jackets 3, one of the most September-level regular season games I can remember covering. No emotion, no passion, and I'm not just talking about the home team. Columbus didn't have any either. It was bizarre. Maybe a couple of stretches where there was some actual action. But for the most part, wow. Now, I don't care about the visitors. I do care about the home team. And it couldn't have been clearer what was occurring on that front. Earlier in the day, I'd reported that Kyle Dubas will attempt to trade Jake Guentzel by tonight, as in Wednesday night. The reason for an artificial deadline in advance of the real NHL deadline at 3 p.m. Friday, I would think would be obvious, because if he can't get something done, then you've got to go to plan B or plan C. And I'm here to tell you that from what I've heard, plan B is already in effect. Hear me out on this. I've been telling you for a while now that the only way a trade involving Jake was going to be palatable would be as what's known as a sign-and-trade, meaning you negotiate a contract, you negotiate the extension, and then trade the player to the new team so the new team doesn't just pay for a 2-month rental. They're paying for somebody that they can have for years to come. Everyone benefits because the Penguins end up getting a higher trade return. Now Jake's not a rental. Now Jake is just, a player that you're getting from somebody else and keeping. Well, what I heard into the night was that this wasn't going particularly well for Dubas, that there isn't much of a sign and trade market. So what's left is a rental market, is a 2-month rental market. And if that concept sounds familiar to you, that's because the Penguins have been doing it for years. That's how they got Jeff Carter. That's how they got Ricard Raquel. That's how they got going back to Jerome McGinley, Justin Schultz, just a ton of these guys. It's been happening for years here. Only now it's the other way around. And it's not an attractive option. In fact, as I see it, it's an idiotic option. Take away, if you can, my general stance that I'd rather see Jake signed long-term and stay here because he's one of your best players. Take away another stance of mine that I'd rather see Jake stick around out of respect for Sidney Crosby. That's not bending over for him. That's not bowing to his wishes. It's being respectful. Best left winger he's ever had. That player is in his prime. And Sid's obviously a really, really good player himself still. But again, just set that aside and consider nothing more than the ice-cold hockey components to this. Consider the return. See it as, I don't know. I don't think anybody's going to give up a first-round pick for a rental, but let's just say that they do. First-round pick. It's not going to be a high one because the teams that you're talking about here are contenders. So they weren't going to be teams that are set up to pick, 3rd or 4th or 5th overall, something that's going to make an actual dent in your operation very, very soon. You're going to get, a Braden Yeager. You're going to get an Owen Pickering, neither of whom excites anybody. Maybe they will someday, but they don't now. And they wouldn't within Sid's time frame. Let's say it's a young prospect, because I've also heard that Dubas is preferring prospects to picks. Okay, but tell me which team that's a contender would feel comfortable sending out a younger impact type player off of their active roster. when they think they've got a chance at winning a really long, tough tournament in which young legs can be very valuable. Nobody's going to do this. Nobody. Jim Rutherford wouldn't do that. Jim will send you all his picks, but he's not going to send away a young player he knows he's going to need for a couple of months. So what do? Trade Jake for whatever's available? Are you trading Jake just for change's sake? If that happens, and I'm here to tell you that's the way it's shaping up, if that happens, a lot of people, even people who right now would consider themselves to be in favor of a trade, are going to be plenty PO'd. And a bunch of those will be in that locker room and in that little world. Now, you can go, Joe talk show caller on this and say, well, heck with those guys. They dug their own hole and they harumph, got beat really badly in Edmonton and blew a lead in Calgary, and I'm really mad, so this is okay. Come on. This is about the franchise's short-term future. Theoretically, if this is done intelligently, it could also be about the franchise's long-term future. I'm going to put this in what I hope is the clearest possible terminology, and it's stealing from an ancient sports adage. The team that gets the best player in the trade wins the trade. Whoever is making a trade involving Jake wins that trade. Whoever makes the trade involving Jake as a 2-month rental in which the Penguins get very little back, what are we even talking about here? When I went downstairs to the locker room last night after the game, I was a little bit late. I'm not the world's fastest walker, so I got there like maybe about a minute or so after everybody else, all the other media had already been in the room, and as I'm passing through this other area, I saw Jake embracing an equipment manager, longtime equipment manager, emotionally. And bear in mind that this team has a practice scheduled for today at noon. So somebody knew something, or somebody's preparing for something. On the ice, I saw a version of Sid that I don't recall having seen in a long, long time, if ever, in a regular season game. He was unplugged. I'm not going to say he was actively protesting or that, he was trying to send some kind of message or something like that, but he wasn't there. He wasn't there at all. And the same applied, by the way, after the game, where in the locker room, he wasn't there. And if you don't think that's important, if you don't think what Sid thinks and feels is important, I can't begin to understand what would compel anyone to press play on a program called Daily Shot of Penguins if they're not thinking about what Sid's thinking. Because that's just not how this franchise, this family that's been built within and around this franchise has functioned all these decades. When we come back, J1Q. Today's J1Q comes from Ben, who says, DK, do you get the sense that this is an issue of Jake Guentzel's representation wanting more on his next contract than Kyle Dubas is willing to pay? Or is it simply a hockey trade situation and Guentzel is the best hand that Dubas has to play? I'm really glad you brought this up, Ben, because there is at least this possibility. I haven't heard it. I haven't seen it reported anywhere else either. But there is the possibility that what Jake would be asking for in a potential extension would be crazy high and not something that would make sense for Dubas and the Penguins. I'm open-minded on that front. However, I can also state that what I have heard about these talks is that there really haven't been many of consequence. They haven't gotten to the point where they said, okay, let's really try to nail this down. And that, if you think about having this artificial deadline of tonight to get a trade done, kind of dovetails. Because if you can't get a trade done, you have almost no choice, if you're Dubas, but to try to get an extension done. You're not letting Jake walk away for absolutely nothing. And you aren't exactly going to get a happy Jake hanging around for the rest of the season if he's been put through this. And it is an ordeal. I know these guys get paid millions and everything else here. That doesn't mean this doesn't hit you in the feels if you're them and your family and your friends and, your teammates. The guys that I was talking to in that locker room last night, they were tight-lipped, even in casual conversation, but there was a feel in there that was as unmistakable as what the 17,000 plus in the Arena Bowl were witnessing. They were wound like wires. This is not just another player in their world. And on top of that, seeing their captain react the way that he did was something that probably even Evgeny Malkin and Chris Letang hadn't witnessed before. So it's a weird time in that orbit. And the end of this whole scenario can't come soon enough for all concerned. But yes, to reiterate my answer to your very, very good and fair question, it is possible, though I haven't heard it, that Jake and his demands or his agent's demands would be what's forcing Dubas's hand. I'm at least open-minded to that. And I appreciate the question. I appreciate everybody listening to Daily Shot of Penguins, and you'd better believe we're going to have another one of these tomorrow.